Same as the divine grace, Bhakti Vedanta Swami Maharaj. Bhagavate Vasudevaya Bhagavate Vasudevaya Bhagavate Vasudevaya. My understanding is we're going to be discussing one verse, chapter 9, Bhagavad Gita, verse 27. And I'll say, it's a very well-known verse. and you can respond and chant it 3 times. Yat karoshi yadasnasi,
Yat karoti yadasnasi,
yosi yadasi yat,
yat karoti yadasi yat,
tapasyasi kaunteya,
yat satyasati kampeya,
yat kurashvavad arpanam, yat karoshi yadasnasi,
yat karoti yadasnasi,
yosi yadasi yat, tapasyasi kaunteya,
satyasati kampeya,
kurashvavad arpanam, yat karoshi yadasnasi,
karoti yadasnasi,
yosi yadasi yat,
yat karoti yadasi yat,
tapasyasi kaunteya,
satyasati kampeya,
kurashvavad arpanam. Good. Translation. Whatever you do, whatever you eat, whatever you offer or give away, and whatever austerities you perform, do that, O son of Kunti, as an offering to me. Purport by Srila Prabhupada. Thus it is the duty of everyone to mold his life in such a way that he will not forget Krishna in any circumstance. Everyone has to work for maintenance of his body and soul together, and Krishna recommends herein that one should work for him. Everyone has to eat something to live, therefore he should accept the remnants of food self-offered to Krishna. Any civilized man has to perform some religious ritualistic ceremonies, therefore Krishna recommends do it for me. And this is called Archana. Everyone has a tendency to give something in charity. Krishna says, give it to me. And this means that all surplus money accumulated should be utilized in furthering the Krishna consciousness movement. Nowadays, people are very much inclined to the meditational process, which is not practical in this age. But if anyone practices meditating in Krishna 24 hours a day, pretty good meditation, by chanting the Hare Krishna mantra around his beads, is surely the greatest meditator, the greatest yogi, as substantiated in the 6th chapter of Bhagavad Gita. This verse, 927, is found in the talks between Lord Chaitanya and Ramananda Roy. Anyone not familiar with that discussion? I should give a little background. Ramananda Roy. So, you all know who is Lord Chaitanya, correct? Yes. Okay. So Lord Chaitanya, after taking sannyas and going to Jagannath Puri and staying there for some time, he indicated to the devotees there that he wanted to go look for his brother. Lord Chaitanya had a brother named Vishwarupa. Vishwarupa, when Lord Chaitanya was younger, had taken sannyas. And it was said that he had traveled to South India. The Lord Chaitanya said, I want to go look for my brother. Lord Chaitanya is omniscient. He knew that his brother had already departed this world, but he said so anyways, because what he really wanted to do was travel throughout South India and spread the chanting of the Hare Krishna mantra. So the devotees delayed and delayed, and they found different reasons for delaying, and finally they said, okay. But Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya was the chief priest of the king. And Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya said to Lord Chaitanya, previously when I was traveling in South India, I met Ramananda Roy. And I thought he was a sentimentalist. But now I understand, because of my association with you, that he wasn't a sentimentalist, he was very elevated Vaishnava. I recommend, please, when you travel, meet him, and you'll be very happy. Lord Chaitanya was planning to meet him anyway, so when they met, there was a discussion. First, when they met, they were like so ecstatic, they lost all composure. And Ramananda Roy at that time was the governor of Chennai, at that time Chennai, Madras, in Bhagavatam, or Chaitanya Charitamrita was much larger than just a city. It was a part of the kingdom of Odisha. Prataparudraja had him appointed as a governor. Ramananda Roy was one of 5 brothers, and his father, Lord Chaitanya later said, Bhavananda Roy, the father, your Pandavan, these are your 5 sons, these 5 boys. So Ramananda Roy was Arjuna in the assembly of the Pandavas. So Ramananda Roy was very, very learned and very elevated spiritually. So when they met, they were just ecstatic, and it was just bewildering, the attendance of the governor, like this. So they controlled themselves and made an arrangement to meet at a later time. They met by the banks of the river Godavari. We visited that place. It's a nice place, very serene. And Lord Chaitanya began the discussion by asking Ramananda Roy, the starting point of their talk was, what's the goal of life? And how to attain it? So then, in response, Ramananda Roy spoke different verses. And Lord Chaitanya acknowledged, that's all right, go further, that's all right, go further, that's all right, go further. So one of those verses in their discussion was this one. Yat karoshi, yat asnasi, yat stahosi, udasyat. And in Prabhupada's explanation of go further, it's likened to karma yoga. What's karma yoga? Karma yoga is where you do some activity and you offer the results of the activity to Krishna or to the Supreme. So that's this verse. Now, this verse is in chapter 9. And chapter 9 is the most confidential knowledge, meaning devotional service. So it's not pure devotional service, but it's devotional service. And a major distinction that's made by commentators is the consciousness behind the activity. Specifically, when this verse is speaking of after having done something, there's mentioned 2 things. After having done something, in order to release oneself from bondage from that something, you offer the result of that something. And one of the ways of distinguishing unavoided devotional service from after you've done something, you offer the result, is even before you do something, you're surrendered. That is to say, some persons may, in order to become free from bondage, because when you do something, there's a reaction, even good something. There's a bondage, there's a good reaction. And the good reaction or bad reaction binds one to birth and death. And so those that want release from birth and death do karma yoga. because it's up karma, it's free from bondage reactions. So some persons do it like this. They do something to become free from bondage, because you have to do something. Prabhupada is saying in purple, you have to eat. And any religious person does some kind of ritual, they'll do it for me. That is, the resolve is offered to Krishna. Two related things. This verse has its companion verse in the Bhagavatam. The Bhagavatam companion verses, Canto 11, Chapter 2, verse 36, where Chapter 2 is the Navyogendras. You're nodding, so you know Navyogendras? No. Navyogendras. Do you like hearing Bhagavatam stories? Because it's new. But so, in the 5th canto we hear about Rishabdev. Rishabdev was the father of Bharat Maharaj. You've heard of Bharat Maharaj. The Earth planet was renamed after Bharat Maharaj. His father was Rishabdev. And Rishabdev was an incarnation of Vishnu. Rishabdev, Canto 5. So Rishabdev had 100 sons. And of those 100 sons, 9 were the Navyogendras. Some number of them were kings to rule the planet Earth. Some others were Brahmanas, and some others were beyond the Varnashram system. They're on a scale of Krishna consciousness or bhakti, like Narada, Navyogendras. So the Navyogendras have the capacity to travel anywhere. Narada uses his Veena, and the Navyogendras, they don't even need a Veena. They have powers to be able to travel anywhere. So they were traveling here and there, and they came to a sacrificial arena where a king of the time named King Nimi was doing a yajna. King Nimi stopped right in the middle of the yajna, stood up, because they were descending from the sky. And he folded his palms and said, I don't know who you are, but you're obviously perfected souls. I have some burning questions I'd like to ask you. So one of the questions that 11th canto, chapter 2, so that the answers to one of his questions says essentially the same thing as in 927 Bhagavad Gita. The language, the Sanskrit is different, but the essence is all activities, the fruits of those activities should be offered to the Supreme. And second, this concept of offering the fruits or karma yoga, nishkam karma yoga. Nishkam is an adjective, means without desiring something. Because there are persons that do something to get free from bondage, and there are persons that do something without wanting something. Nishkam karma yoga. So in the 11th canto Bhagavatam, starting with chapter 7, is Uddhava asking questions of Krishna, and Krishna giving answers to his questions. And in part of their discussion, Krishna says, just as Prabhupada is saying in the purport here, somehow or other, Vikramadeva Krishna. That's the goal of yoga practice. But Krishna says, those that are capable of fixing their mind on me always, they don't need prescribed duties. Like, for example, the residents of Vrindavan, Krishna's eternal associate. They do things. They observe, like Nanda Maharaj observed Ekadasi, and he was breaking the Ekadasi feast on Ekadasi fast on Dwadasi, when Varuna's messengers kidnapped him because they thought he was breaking the rule. Anyway, they observe things, but they don't have to observe things. But there are persons that have to observe things. And they have to observe things because the mind isn't pure. The Krishna explains. One who fixes his mind upon me, that's best. But if someone has, their mind is colored by fruitive intention, then they have to do two things. They have to offer the results of their activities to me. That's this person. And the other is hear about me. Is that also? Those two things purify the mind. So this is what this verse is doing. In order to purify them, supposing one doesn't, mind isn't purified. Supposing mind isn't purified. There's a way to purify it. And the impure mind does something to get something. That's called fruitive activity. In Prabhupada's language, right? Fruitive activity. It means you do something to get something. And who does something but they don't want to get something? That's a yogi. One whose mind is pure. They do things, but they don't do things to get things. They do things for the pleasure of Krishna. That's bhakti. But if your mind isn't pure yet, you're still wanting, you want things. You do things to get things. To make your mind pure. And that's what the commentators, Prabhupada is not explaining what I just said, but our Bhagavad Gita and Vishwanath, they make it very clear. This is as in the talk with Ramananda Roy, it's a stage. It's not Shuddha Bhakti, but it's to make the mind pure, to prepare one, to qualify one, to engage in Shuddha Bhakti, because it's through Shuddha Bhakti you can have a clear idea that the obstacles to know Krishna are removed. In verse, as long as it's true with intention, there's obstacles to know Krishna. Factually, we can have a notional understanding of Krishna, but not a factual, not a relationship spirit while we're doing what we're doing, while we're chanting, or worshiping, or cooking, or going to school, or anything else that we might do in life, eat. So we do things, so the indication is, in this verse, to prepare one for that most confidential part of knowledge, which is Shuddha Bhakti. It's helping one to become free from the contamination of fruitive intention, to let go of fruits. If you let go of the fruits, what do you do with them? To offer them to Krishna. Supposing you're not a bhakta, that would be a nice thing, but supposing you're not a bhakta, but you don't like contentment either, so you try to do something else besides offer something to Krishna. You try to stop work, karma sannyas. That's what Arjuna is proposing. My duty as a Kshatriya, I see only problems, so I'll tell you what, I'll stop being a Kshatriya. Karma sannyas. I'll just go to the mountains and become a hermit. Sorry, Arjuna, not your adhikar, not your qualification to do that. Your qualification is to give protection. So give protection where you're doing it for me. Or whatever your nature is, you do it for me. So now one more time, that there's this distinction between before you do something for Krishna, your consciousness is, this is dedicated to Krishna. And then the activity is performed. The offering comes first, the activity comes second. That's Shuddha Bhakti. In your whole life, it's just a flow of submission to Krishna and the activities you perform, that everything goes to Krishna. Then there's another. I have a nature. My mind has a nature, my body has a nature, a psychophysical nature. I'm inclined to such and such. So, let me do that such and such. And then the results all over to Krishna. Because I don't want bondage of doing things and getting reactions to the things I do. I mean, it's a stage of liberation, working towards karma-free life. It's bona fide, it's in Bhagavad Gita, but it's not complete. It's a step in the direction. It's not complete. Because Krishna is only known through bhakti. It's when you're in that relationship of loving service, then there's surrender because Krishna is the object, and then whatever your body and mind, psychophysical nature does, it goes. It's for Krishna. Your whole life is for Krishna. Manasa deha geha yoki chumor makimutam chichi. Surrender means that. Manasa, mind. Deha, body. Geha, home. I notice there's a few new homes in the same room. They can smell paint. So, new homes are fine, and they are to be dedicated to Krishna service. And everything is to be dedicated to Krishna service. Not just so that there isn't bondage from owning a home, but if the other purpose is dedicated the activity to the service of Krishna. And there's, what we're doing right now is one of the ways to dedicate the home to the service of Krishna. You bring devotees of Krishna to sing Hare Krishna together and hear the message of Bhagavad Gita together. Discuss topics of Krishna together, take prasad together, dedicate our activities, the social part of our lives. That's also social needs, and we dedicate those to Krishna. The goal is to make that Krishna connection, and that's devotional service. And that's the way of knowing Krishna. Okay. Now you three the same age? No. Who's older? You're older? How much older? What's your age? 18. Okay. And your age? 9. 11. Okay, nice friend. What do you and your friends look like? Most of the time. But they have devotee friends. What's your favorite part of Krishna consciousness? Reading. Oh, fantastic. And what kind of reading do you like best?
Krishna book.
Krishna book. What's your favorite story in Krishna? You have one yet?
Everything.
Everything. I just spent 6 hours or 5.5 hours with devotees from China discussing Krishna's marriage to Rukmini. That was really nice. Really nice. There's Govardhan Hill, lifting Krishna, lifting Govardhan Hill. It's pretty special. Boys like, Krishna killed constantly. What's your favorite activity? Kirtan? You have one yet? You like
I like going to the temple.
going to the temple?
And
Seeing the deities, or when you go to the temple, what's the best part? Seeing your friends?
no, not but it's fun, but
It's fun.
I like to help out with the kindergarten
Ah,
and I like to sing. That's really
the Sunday school or the Sunday lecture? Sunday school. And if you're like Krishna book, I'll just share something with you. Yesterday evening, the Texas A&M, Friday evening, and it's a really nice audience there. And there was a line waiting to one to have a one-on-one conversation. One person, real tall fellow, said, kind of like, he's read a lot, that person. He said one of his friends recommended that he read Srimad Bhagavatam and meditate on the message of Srimad Bhagavatam. Well, he did it. He got an abridged copy with just the story, no commentary, report, no Krishna book or anything. And that for 1 year, he read for an hour to two every day and meditated on what was there. And he said, my experience was my consciousness got lifted like anything. But then when I stopped, because I finished it, so he hadn't really realized. So I was thinking, I said, Srimad Bhagavatam is this big when it sits on our shelf. But I should have thought, I should have told him to get a Christian book. And then you'll understand the meaning behind the stories. And here's a little Prabhupada story. When Srila Prabhupada began speaking to his young Western students, he spoke over and over and over and over and over and over about a couple of things. One is impersonal conception of God, beware because God is a person. And another he said was people that skip over the first 9 cantos, go right to the 10th canto, and speak about Krishna's pastime without having the qualification to understand it. And about Krishna's pastime, they like Rasa Leela, so they go right to Rasa Leela. They don't understand it. They kept saying it over and over. And then, much to our surprise, he translated the entire 10th canto. And then not only he translated, but we're supposed to distribute it. We were supposed to, we did. To just American people that know nothing about anything. But what he wanted to do was, he didn't know how long he would live, and he wanted to have the Western world have a proper understanding of Krishna pastime. So what he said to us was, I did a summary study, which means I can do that in one. He said he could explain it in a way that a person that haven't read the first 9 cantos can understand Krishna. At least the opportunity is there. And, kids can understand Krishna from a young age. Have you seen that 10th canto version of specifically for children? Have you seen that, or you're just happy with the Krishna book as it is?
I never saw that temple.
It's available. You might want to have your mom check it out. Okay. It's different illustrations, and the language is really smooth.
It has 4 books, Becca.
What's you say?
There's 4 books.
Yes, 4 books.
I don't know how many parts. I know that who the team is that's working on it, it's Arudha. Arudha is the lady that's got a whole set of artists and people helping. Well, she's planning to do all 12 cantos for children. That's major. But it was the 10th canto is, I think, where she started.
Okay.
Yeah. Arudha. You like to read, it's nice. Have you started reading the Krishna Dharma version of Ramayana? You know, that's the next one too. The language is nice. Really easy to hear, he's a really good writer. Nice. Mahabharata too. Same lot of Krishna Dharma. Mom's taking note of Krishna Dharma's Ramayana and Mahabharata. If you like to read. I know a girl that's 10, and she's 9 and just turned 10. She reads Ramayana every day. She won't go to bed without reading Ramayana, and she really likes Ramayana. So it's different than Krishna. It's transcendental. She likes Kirtan too. In fact, she has a weekly class for 9, 10-year-olds from all over the country. As I travel, I meet people her age. And they, you know, if they want, they can join the class, and if they like the class, they can continue. You might be interested.
She's joined already.
She joined already? Okay. Okay. You like it? Good class? They were reading Nilamrita. Yeah?
Yeah.
Yeah. Do you know about her already?
Yeah.
You have her. Did I mention last time I was here? Okay. Okay.
And your Sally also is reading with Radha.
Okay. So any discussion on Bhagavad Gita 927? Or whatever you'd like to discuss? Get Kuroshi, Yadasnasi, Yashtosi, Vidnasi, good verse you never. Kuroshi, Madara, she has some.
Hare Krishna Maharaj, very nice to have you here. Maharaj, just focusing on the reading, like Samantha said, if you can give us some tips of reading and how exactly we should be reading.
Exactly, should be.
And then reading and contemplation as well, like this one is talking about.
Well, there are different answers to that question, and the different answers depends upon, the stage of bhakti that one is in. So, one of the things to be wary about, just like this student that I met last night, I don't know what version he was reading. He didn't either. But it sounded like it was a condensed version of something, not the whole Srimad Bhagavatam. So one of the things when reading is the source that you're reading from. It's very important to be discriminating about the source that you're reading from. course, I'm sure just reading, BBT publications or those related, but that's an important consideration. Reading ideal is reading in the association of others, because Kathayantas Shama Nityam Tushanti Charamanti. The topics are meant for discussion. And it's not exactly, mining for truth as much as relishing the topic. In other words, say the same thing a different way. Read from the heart and not from the head. The objective of reading is not gathering bits of information and putting the information in your information basket over here, and gathering information, filling up your information basket. It's for purification. So when Krishna's, one of the things when reading, you open, as you're opening your book, you think, Krishna, please speak to me. Because that's what he's doing. So if your heart is open, that's a better way to read than if your head is searching for information. There is knowledge in scripture and Bhagavad Gita and everything. But what's the purpose of that knowledge? Or it's not realized without bhakti. Bhakti is when, I want to improve the purity of my life. So here's an opportunity for me to purify my heart and my life. Here comes that sound vibration. And you'll remember what you read better that way than if it's just information. I'm making that emphasis because a big part of our way that we've been trained in education, modern days, is information. No transformation. Educators know that. Certainly devotees know that, but the educators even know that. So how to bring transformation? That's how to meet with people that want to do it, that they want to make their lives more rich and full with a life of devotion towards the purpose and goal of life. And find companionship like that, read together with those people, and discuss with those people.
But Maharaj, I have a follow-up as well related to that.
Okay.
Maharaj, there is so much on YouTube related to what we read.
Related to?
On YouTube, it's like too much. So, how important it is to read and then continue to listen. I mean, it just becomes an overload sometimes. So,
Yeah.
And then what I experience is I'm reading something, I'm enjoying it, and then I go on YouTube, and then I'm listening to some related talks, and then it's like, okay, do I go here? It becomes just such a confusing thing, and all those talks are wonderful, and it's collection of so much information and knowledge. So that's why my question came in.
Well, this is where discrimination comes in. It's related to your first question. Ideal that you have a teacher, and when you have a teacher, you don't need to go YouTubing around. Build a strong foundation before you build a house. And so, some qualified teacher that isn't just a task master that goes too fast or too much or something like that, but because the transmission is not just cover the topics, but it's the relationship. And through the relationship, then things can be understood, but there isn't a relationship, because without relationship, it's information. So you don't mind, this is my recommendation, just dial down the YouTube stuff, and some, with discrimination, and primarily teachers, a teacher or teachers that systematically go through the text, especially in the beginning. Especially in the beginning. And then when you won't have this abundant information in your information basket, but you'll have an understanding of the foundation core scriptures and a relationship with the teacher that is meaningful. And then go on to the next, you use the same methodology. And then you're qualified to teach it. And then when you start teaching something, you'll learn more than when you were just a student. Everyone learns that one.
Thank you, Maharaj.
Just last night, when I walked into this hall, and the Texas A&M meeting was being held, there was an Indian student at the front. He was giving a Bhagavad Gita class, and I hadn't met him before. Rahul is his name, I think. And he has, he just now completed his Bhakti Shastri, and now he's teaching Bhagavad Gita. And his life was he looked really happy, and he knew what he was doing, and he was just sharing with others what he's received. And he told me who his teachers were, and he's got good teachers. And now he's teaching, and he's still a student. But that's really nice. That's really nice. Same thing can happen with these girls or with children. When young persons that like to learn have a good teacher, they can then become teachers. There's that's going presently. There's two devotees. They studied Bhagavad Gita twice under a teacher when they were little. And now they're teaching Bhagavad Gita. They're both married and have one child. And then together, they're teaching Bhagavad Gita to teenagers. You're a teenager. So, Mukunda is kind of a kirtan celebrity in America, and he and another devotee are teaching the Bhagavad Gita. They've been doing it for 3.5 years. Little by little, enlightening with young people who understand and discussing with young people who are going through what teenagers are going through. Why don't you give her this content? You can see if it's something, you probably get a lot of schoolwork or stuff. It's on the weekends, Saturdays. Okay. Okay. Anything else?
There's a question online.
Okay, go for it.
Krishna, this is from a previous class on the Lord Vamana. Even though Maharaj, Bali Maharaj was a pure devotee and could have led the heavens in the sattvic way, why was Indra still antagonistic towards Bali?
Why was he antagonistic towards
Bali? Mahabali.
Bali Maharaj.
Bali Maharaj.
Who was antagonistic towards Bali?
Indra. Lord Indra.
Why was Indra antagonistic towards Bali? That's the question?
Yes, why was yes.
Well, He was antagonistic towards Bali. Bali was antagonistic towards him. He came, bumped him out of his kingdom.
Okay. There's actually follow-up questions on that actually. Is it just due to his state as a mixed devotee?
Is it just due to his what?
Mixed devotee.
Mixed devotion?
State as a
No, no. This from the other day, Romapada Swami. Okay, well,
Sorry, Maharaj, there's a little more to the question.
more questions?
Yes. Also in application, when devotees are attached to a certain project or service and are hesitant to bring up in the next generation or even other devotees, how do we, one, protect ourselves from developing such mentality with service we are close to? Second,
Wait. I'm not sure I understand the question.
okay.
Before you go into the question number two.
So how do we, yes,
Put the mic in.
okay,
Slowly read.
yes,
Don't read it, say it.
okay.
Take your understanding of what the person is asking. If you just read it again, you'll probably still not understand it.
Right. How do we protect ourselves from developing such a mentality with the service?
What mentality? Mentality of what?
Attachment to service. Attachment to service, yes.
Well, here's a nice Prabhupada story. One devotee told me that they asked Prabhupada, is it okay to be attached to your service? And Prabhupada said, yes. You be attached to the service that your spiritual master assigned you. And if he assigned you to do something else, then you be attached to that something else. In other words, the attachment is to the spiritual master, or not, I got this assignment, not attached to the assignment. You're attached to the mode of service and being requested to do this and then to do that and then to do something else. And be attached to do whatever you're being asked to do. I had practical experience of that in the course of my years of devotional service. For some period of time doing this, someone tapping me on the shoulder and said, hey, can you go over there to bed? I'm sure. Go there. Then do that for a while. Okay, back here and do the same. Sure. Go over there and do the other thing. Sure. So, whimsical changing, that's not good. And whimsical being attached to a designation, that's not good. Be attached to service. So how do you get over being attached to something when you're not necessarily wholesome to be attached to something? Well, you learn to become attached to Krishna and the service to Krishna, whatever it is. Whatever it is. If you're deprived of service, that's nothing to worry about. But if you can serve in this capacity or some other capacity, that's fine. If someone is not attached to Krishna, but they're more attached to the external, then they will be attached to the designation of this service or that service or some other service. So the remedy is learn to become attached to Krishna.
Second part of the question is, how do we react when we are put in a situation where we are taking up service that maybe a senior devotee you respect isn't so excited about?
I don't follow the question. You follow the question?
Yes, Maharaj.
Yeah.
Don't just read it back. What's what the person is?
So Gurumaj is asking, or she is asking, how do we react when you are put into a service?
And then,
That maybe a senior devotee should be doing that, but you are put into that.
if you're assigned some service, you can be in a humble mood or a realistic mood that I'm not so qualified. And you can say, I'm not so qualified. Someone says, that's okay. Do your best.
No, not that you know. I have assigned the service, but that's the same service from senior devotee is interested. So like that, no? But to an extent.
Well, and then you can defer to the senior devotee. The senior devotee may say, thank you very much, I really was wanting to do that service. Or the senior devotee may say, no, you should do that service. Then you're just not an upstart. You're being respectful to seniority. So, it's just social and respect.
Yeah.
Don't lose respect. Don't lose courtesy.
But there's a different understanding of the question.
It's a third understanding.
Chessable has a different understanding.
Okay, let's hear Jason about her third understanding.
So this question is from Sanctuary, and she's asking that you are given a service which you will take up, but the senior devotee the senior devotee you respect is not very excited for you to take up that service.
The senior devotee that knows that you've been asked to do a service and they're not so enthusiastic for you to do that service.
That's
Okay, that's the third understanding.
You want to read the question?
No, it's good, it's good, it's good. I mean, if Sanchari, if we didn't get it with all three of those possibilities, you can send it again. Well, I would say it depends. It depends on the relationship with that senior devotee that's not so enthusiastic for you to take up a service you've been asked to do. So it depends on the relationship with that senior devotee. You can go to this, for example, here's some menu choices. You can go to that senior devotee and say, I have the sense that you're not so comfortable with me taking up this service. Maybe you could explain why, or you could say, I've been asked to do this service, but I have a sense that you're not so comfortable with me taking up this service. But I feel obliged because I've been asked. So what should I do? Because I don't want you to be uncomfortable, but I don't want to ignore a service that's been asked of me to do. So, except that there's many options, it depends upon the relationship. And, sometimes services need to be done, you can't just, pause unlimited, the service needs to be done. Supposing there's a fire in the kitchen, you gotta deal with it. Or there's an offering for the deities that needs to be cooked, so it has to be done in the time and fashion. So there's variables. So Sanchari needs to be a little more specific, maybe not in a public forum like this, but if it's really an important question, then be a little more specific, that makes it a little easier to understand what are the choices and how to make the choices.
Thanks for giving the relation. So, I have a question about how do we develop discipline and devotion to read Bhagavad. So, we were reading together, me and my wife, to our daughter, and then life catches up and then we stop. And then we read again, and then life catches up again and we stop. So, how do we develop that discipline and devotion? It's not that we are not wanting to do service to Krishna. But every time we try to do it, life catches up and we know we should read it every night. but then life catches up again.
Different things work for different people, but the cause is passion. And so the more goodness, you'll reduce the passion. The goodness influence will predominate instead of the passion. The passion means here comes something urgent. And the urgent squeezes out goodness. So I diminish that which I know is good for me because there's some urgency. And then the urgency subsides. It's unsteady bhakti, anishtita bhakti. Up and down. So increase goodness, and by increasing goodness, passion and ignorance will subside. And one of the best ways, according to Bhagavatam, of increasing goodness is reading Bhagavatam. It's right there in the Bhagavatam. Nashna prayeshu bhadreshu nityam bhagavam siddhataprajasmo bhavatam bhavavarishye cheti taranam sitham prayushivati. So, each time, it's like a child. Association, read with others. You're doing it within your family, but it's unstable. Expand the circle so you feel more obliged because you're reading with others. It'll go on without you, and then when you're ready, you can just jump in. So sadhu sangha will help restore steadiness when there's unsteadiness due to the modes moving, things moving. And commitment. Commitment creates steadiness. Or say it another way, without commitment nothing happens. Even material things don't happen without commitment. With commitment. So so when the commitment gets the space, which is what you're saying, by life catches up with you, then you stand up and you do it again. Like a child learning to walk. Because walking capacity is there. By practicing to walk, the walking capacity, motor skills come up. It's innate. Steadiness is the healthy, and the unsteadiness is the unhealthy. So you continue to strive for steadiness by right means. Sadhu Sangha is Sadhu Sangha and working, find ways in your daily life that you can increase goodness that will then thereby diminish the influence of the other modes. Your eating habits, the time that you regulation, and you're taking rest on time, getting up on time, not getting, much as you can. There's going to be circumstances, but as much as you can. Regulating cleanliness, truthfulness, austerity of speech, and things that are in the quality of goodness. You just increase all around in goodness. You get an incubation chamber for steadiness in your activities.
Thank you so much.
Nice question.
Hare Krishna.
Go ahead.
Sorry, Maharaj, asking you a lot of questions, but this really helps me in your personal presence. So, Maharaj, I like to read, but and I found what works for me best is reading in the early hours of the morning, like waking up and then doing that. And once I do that, I don't feel like stopping. And it's something surreal about it. And I never experience the same thing when I do it in the evening, though I do get time, but the quality changes. But what happens in my case is then my chanting suffers because that morning time is for reading and it's for chanting as well. And so then my chanting starts falling or the quality changes because it's not the same when I do it during the day. So what would you suggest? And I've tried to do it that, okay, I'm just going to read for an hour and then I'm going to go to chanting in the morning. But somehow it's hard to stop reading at that point of time.
You're fortunate.
But then chanting is very important, Maharaj. Then my rounds suffer.
You're unfortunate.
I'm fortunate because I'm in your presence.
My answer to this kind of thing, and as well as, scheduling things, I call it blocks of time. My language. And you arrange your day with blocks of time. And when the bell rings, it's move on to the next. So when you're doing in this block of time, you're doing. When you're in the kitchen cooking, you're not, you're cooking fish. When each thing you do, be absorbed, and then the bell rings, you move on to the next. It's a little bit, the discipline question that he's asking. But you learn that, especially people that are busy, as part of the honor that you have of being busy, is it requires time management. And time management is about time. Just today was tomorrow in New Zealand. We gave a class today on Appearance Day about, so he was so regulated. So regulated. Center that document. 15 minutes with this, and he wouldn't stopwatch. Not a stopwatch, a pocket watch. When it was second thing, I would not watch. But he was so regulated. How busy. He had 10 children. And, one of them was a pure devotee, and, 100 books. Oh, it's so much. Very regulated. So, discipline comes from, you have things you wish to accomplish. And it's true, if you neglect your job, everything's going to go down. What do you do? Then you become a Gandhi instead of a Bhakta. So lots of time. And one thing you could try is not sleep less, but take rest a little earlier and get up a little earlier so you have more time for both things in the morning. But when the bell rings, the schedule says, okay, move on. And in your case, if you like reading more than chanting, chant first. And then you'll really look forward to reading and then you read. But then you're going to have to go on and do something for your breakfast. Jayadvaita Swami, another Sannyasi, he was the other way around. He said, I know that I'll chant around, so he was reading early in the morning. Because as the day went on, he might neglect reading, but he's not going to neglect chanting. But, we want to be hopefully following the best time of the early morning. We had a Japa retreat in Houston over the Labor Day weekend. It was really interesting. Guru Bhakti is a medical doctor, and she recommended from a physician, rest-wise, the body is more rested if you take rest at 8 o'clock and get up at 2 o'clock. Then if you take rest at 9 o'clock and get up at 3 o'clock, or 10 o'clock and get up at The body, your body will need less rest. It's more, physiologically. Ayurveda says the same thing. So, without the numbers, early rest, and early conditions. So when she said that, a whole bunch of people got up at 2 o'clock. Some people got up at 1. It's because the next day was our 64-hour day. Some people got up at midnight. So, if those hours they are the best. I had going with the hours. So consider if you can not, extreme way, but in an incremental way, leverage things more towards rest and just lights out at night. Take rest. You get up early. You do that, you're going to be tired earlier. So you okay. I think we're done, yes?
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you very much.